So we're here at the City Summit of the Americas, launching Build Changes, Resilient Housing Across the Americas webinar series with the Mayor of Hawaii County, Mayor Mitch Roth. So thank you so much, Mayor Roth, for coming and joining our conversation.
Our pleasure. Hawaii has some of the most difficult permitting and housing laws in the country. And, you know, it doesn't just go to what's in the house, it goes to land use.
Yeah.
It goes to, culture, it goes to water.
Yeah.
I mean, on my island, our island's the size of Connecticut, and on one side we have rain, the other side we have the dry side. A lot of people want to go to the dry side. One of the problems on the dry side is lack of available water that we can go to. So one of the things that we are looking at now with the governor of the state of Hawaii and all the mayors, we're looking at a housing emergency proclamation. And that emergency proclamation may loosen up certain restrictions that we have. We, at the current time, have a homeless emergency proclamation that is out there. And what that does is, again, that allows us to look at different ideas. And I think, you need to sometimes take off some of the rules that you have. I often say that we've seen the enemy and the enemy is us. And so where other places it may take a week or two to get a permit, it may take you, when I first started, it took about 8 to 12 months to get a permit. We've been working on our system and working on computer systems that help, mom and pops or, that young couple build a house. That's also important because it's not only large developments where you're going to have affordable housing, but it's also, the young teacher or the police officer or those other people that are building in their community. And so whatever the government can do to work with them to make it a little bit easier to get through the system, I think that's, really important. If you have too many rules, oftentimes what we found is we have rules out there that people forget why the rules were set up in the first place. And so you also have to go back and say, okay, why is this here? Is this still applicable today as to when it was first put in? And in Hawaii, we have like the International Building Code, for example. And the International Building Code is great, but sometimes it doesn't fit. For example, you don't have to worry about snow loads in Hawaii or other things. One of the things that we're looking at in our emergency proclamation is under I think it's the International 2018 Building Code, wind speeds. We want our houses to be safe. If it's over 130 miles an hour, the building code requires you have a engineer sign off on the wind speeds. Well, right now it takes about 6 to 8 months just to get an engineer who's willing to look at what the architect has, and a lot of times they have systems online where they can check those wind speeds. And so if it's at 132, maybe you don't have to have a structural engineer put his stamp on there, as long as the architect is signing off and using, qualified wind speeds. We want the houses to be safe, and what we're finding is oftentimes there's no changes made in the plans.
Oh gosh, this is so interesting because it's exactly parallel to our work in Colombia, where it's been the same issue. The permitting process, the regulatory environment is so onerous and so difficult and so prohibitive for upgrading an existing house. There's a government subsidy out there to do it, but homeowners weren't taking advantage of it because there were so many steps in the process. So making the process easier is essential here. I agree with you about building codes. They're necessary, but they can sometimes be too conservative and they paralyze folks and no action is taken.
Well, what we found is that sometimes it even works against you because people will build anyhow, and they will build without a permit, And
Yeah.
you know, the governments don't have enough resources to go out and necessarily know that a house has been built outside of code. I mean, we
Yeah.
often catch up several years later, and maybe several owners later. And you know, that's also a problem. Also, what happens is, you know, people need housing. People aren't going to move, and so we've seen people living in blue tarp, you know, tents,
Right.
which really isn't a very good situation either. So we need to look and with a mind of how do we solve this problem? How do we work together, but do so where, you know, it's not paralyzing people.
How is technology involved? Are you using AI to maybe move through that engineering evaluation a little bit more quickly, or are you using technology platforms to facilitate any of the work?
Not yet, but part of the idea is to hopefully get there. And you know, we're seeing a lot of new technology
Yeah.
that it's very difficult to, you know, you're working with a code and you know, you're working with human beings who, you know, haven't seen this, and so because they haven't seen it, it may be the greatest idea on earth, but you know, it's, you know, I call it the Dr. Phil question, and the Dr. Phil question is this: how's that working for you?
Yeah, right.
And if it's not working for you, you need to make a change. We know that some of the new technology is a lot cheaper, and you know, it's engineering sound.
Yeah.
And it may be tested someplace else that it's been tested engineer sound, but if it hasn't been tested locally, that's a problem. We need to get over some of those things as well.
The local testing and the buy-in by the homeowner, the home occupant, is so critical, because if you bring in a new technology and no one wants to live there, or it's not appropriate for the climate or culture, or it doesn't work in the local supply chain.
Well, the owner is one part, but the buy-in by the government is another.
Yes.
And you know, like I said, oftentimes it's the people who are in these positions. They know what they like. They know what they've approved before, and if they have new things, it paralyzes them as well. And so we need to change on the government side as well.
Yeah. I so appreciate your leadership. I am so excited to help spread the story of what you've done with some of our international programs. It's striking, really, the parallels between two completely different parts of the world, right? Bogota and Hawaii County. But the challenges are the same, the solutions are there.
Yep.
Yeah, it's really impressive. Congratulations.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.